Hey everybody, welcome back to Record-ology, the Vinyl Nation. Today, first of all, I want to say thank you so very much for supporting this channel. It means a lot to me and enables us to do this show. Without you, it would be nearly impossible. So thank you very, very much for that. And to reward your faithful goodness, I've got a great show for you today. We're going to take a look at a record changer. And I'm going to give you my thoughts. Are they really worth buying? Are they relevant today? You're not going to want to miss this. So when I picked this up, a record changer was something that I had wanted for some time. This is not something you can buy new today. You can't buy a new changer. When Crosley made their Stack-O-Matic back in 2005, I've never even seen one of those, but I've heard that was the last changer. So you kind of have to go back in time if you're interested in a changer. So I did just that. I picked up this bad boy. Now, you may be saying, oh, this is a BSR, this is a BSR. And we've done shows on this before. No, it's not a BSR. It's a Glenburn, which was made by folks that, including the main guy that, invented the BSR. Turntable kind of went and started his own offshoot, which was Glenburn, and they eventually came back to BSR. But anyway, even though it looks like, smells like, tastes like a BSR, it is not truly a BSR. It is a Glenburn changer. So I thought we would just kind of check it out. We've done a full teardown before, so check out that video if you want to see what's inside. But we'll go all the way down to sub-platter level, kind of talk about my thoughts of owning one of these, if I think it's worth it, and some of my observations. I've had it now for about 8 or 9 months, so this isn't quite a 1 year later video. But I had this out for the last week and a half or so, and I was listening to it quite a bit. And I've used it several times in the ensuing months. And I just want to kind of give my thoughts. First of all, the dust cover does just kind of set on top there. It doesn't hinge back or anything. And I thought to myself, with it being so tall, oh, that's because it'll accommodate a stack of records while the cover is on, which most dust covers do allow you to play the records while the dust cover's on. Well, to my surprise, it actually doesn't. It's not quite big enough. So I was like, what? So it covers the works. It's designed to cover all the way up to the spindle, the top of it, and everything else in here, but it doesn't actually cover a stack of records up there, which slightly surprised me. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Kind of tight quarters, so my apologies for that. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting unit. It is a very, very cheapo plastic plinth and case. I mean, that is a very lightweight. If it wasn't for this, and all the stuff inside, the case alone, the plinth as it were, this thing would weigh next to nothing. I mean, it is very, 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 very lightweight. And I think that's because, these were primarily installed in cabinets, wooden turntable cabinets, phonograph cabinets that we've all seen. You can pick them up for, $75 to $150 if you happen to have room for them. That's the thing. It's so massive. And less common, I think, are these guys right here that are sort of standalone units. This right here, which actually this would be the plinth. So the plinth is metal. It's the base that the plinth sits on, which is the super, super lightweight plastic, which I don't notice any issues with it. No, resonance problems whatsoever. The plinth and the turntable itself is a heavy duty piece, and it's mounted on springs. So it's got a nice sponginess to it. It is a rim drive turntable, fully automatic. This one is only missing the little plastic 45 adapter, so I could play 45s on it. Without it, I have to use a manual adapter, and obviously can't use the changer part for the 45s right now. This is, I believe, this was, I think, viewed as more of a higher-end alternative to a regular BSR. But this, and it was made in the UK, it's an English product. But this is, I think, the base model of that series because it has a plastic platter. And there is a metal inlay, but I think this is just sort of like a sticker or an inset piece. Same with this, because the actual platter itself is plastic. So there is a metal one that you can get. All right, let's take a look at some of the features. I'm not going to do a full review on it, but I wanted to kind of give you my thoughts on various aspects of it after, having it for so long. One of the best features of this turntable is it is a 4-speed turntable. So you can play everything from 16 RPM Seebergs all the way up to 78s. and you just adjust the speed like this. It is a rim drive, so it actually moves the wheel to a different position on the cog, which I'll show you in a minute, to control the speed, which I think is pretty snazzy. Here are the start and stop and auto controls, which is a little tricky. I'll show you what I mean to kind of get the hang of. It's not quite as straightforward as it seems right out of the gate. There's certain conditions that make it behave in a different way. Also, the overarm on top, which we'll look at, kind of impacts things as well. Back here we have the record size selector. As with all automatics, you have to be able to tell it what size it is. Otherwise, it's not going to know where to drop the needle. That has to do with any automatic, not just a changer. Some record players, some higher end ones, I believe the Marantz we reviewed a couple years ago, actually detected the size of the record automatically. Also, it's got a queuing lever, and it's interesting. This is a spring-loaded counterbalance back here, and when the spring is not engaged, the weight of the tone arm is substantial. So it's actually very impressive. But the way it's set up now, and everything's very adjustable. As you can see, there's thumb screws and little pilot screw there to make adjustments on everything. But the way it's balanced out now, it tracks nice and light. It tracks very lightly. So it does have a Shure magnetic cartridge, and that sort of cream colored piece on the front is the stylus, and the bracket for the stylus, it comes off. You just pull it straight out. And you know, I think this is an M44 cartridge if I remember correctly, and there's plenty of new old stock styli. So as is the recommendation when you buy an old turntable or a used turntable, I replace the stylus right away. It's like a $12 stylus. That was easy enough to do. The head shell assembly is typical to old style units, where it's sort of this like top down shell with a hollowed out underneath. So I think if you wanted to modify this and put on a more contemporary cartridge, you could do so. In terms of the wiring, so everything comes out of a small opening on the back. And when if you see one of these like at a thrift store or something, be careful. The first one of these I came across actually was at a Goodwill. It looked fine, and I was like, okay, here we go. We're going to try this out. But then all the wires were snipped off. And I was like, what? Because there's no jacks back there. In fact, let me try to show you. As you can see, there's no jacks. They just come out of the base of the unit itself. Here's the power in the brown over here, and then this is the grounding wire and the audio cable. This RCA cable is simply plugged into a board with RCA jacks inside there. Again, if you want to see what's inside, check out the video link. I'll put it in the description below where we tear this apart. As it stands at this moment, here's what these connectors look like. So those are adequate RCA cables. They're definitely not higher end ones. I think they're probably quite old as well. The grounding cable, and then an old school non-grounded power plug. So again, all this, if you were serious enough, could be upgraded, but out of the box, it definitely gets the job done. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the power here, and we'll take a further look. So steering this back to the intended topic of this video, which is really my thoughts on this. Is it a good idea to get yourself a changer, or is it kind of a waste? Because there are no changers out there except for these used ones. But back in the day, this was such a common mechanism, and everybody talks about how the suitcase and all-in-one, you know, Crosley type, I hate to use that term but because it's not accurate, but that type of mechanism is seen so prevalently. It was the case with the BSR type of mechanism. So pretty interesting stuff. Let's go ahead and look under here. This is not impossible to work on. So what I'm going to do off camera here is I'm going to pop a little clip off of this, take this off, and then the thing will lift out. There we go. First thing, the platter, like I said, is plastic. It's a dense, rigid plastic. I think that it's probably not, it actually kind of feels like a vinyl kind of material. And then metal parts kind of everywhere you need them. We've looked under here before. I was impressed, I remember before, with how the blue tape looks new, but you know, perhaps it's not. And when you change speeds, I don't want to re-review everything we've already talked about, but when you change speeds, it moves that idler wheel into different positions on this stepped cog. But I did want to kind of show you under the hood what makes up this BSR type of mechanism. And when you engage it, this wheel moves into position between the inner rim of the subplatter, seen there, and the drive shaft. One of the limitations, and my first gripe about this unit, has to be the speed. Very common, according to my research, that these run fast. And I can't stand that. I cannot stand that. Because it is an AC motor, it's AC synchronous, you can't adjust the speed. There's no pots on the motor like there is with a DC motor. So you're stuck with the speed unless you make mechanical adjustments to the gear ratios. So you could literally shave down, and people do this. I'm not going to do it. People shave down the individual steps on the drive shaft. There's debate about whether or not changing the diameter of the idler itself would change that, or if it would just, transmit the ratio directly from that to the platter. Anyway, those are adjustments I don't feel personally comfortable making yet. I could see myself making adjustments to the idler wheel, mostly, reducing the diameter of it. But the speed consistency is great, but the speed itself being a little bit fast, that's a really annoying thing. And that would keep me from using this as a daily driver until I got that fixed. Although, from what I'm told, it's just sort of a, bear with it kind of a thing. Also worth noting is that audiophiles, quote unquote, don't like these. They view them as harsh to the records. And the speed, as we talked about before, is an overarching issue that others have mentioned in the past. Okay. Now let's actually play a record, and this can get a little bit tricky, so pay attention. And this is another bone of contention. And I attribute the issue to myself, not to the technology. I'm just used to simplicity at a level that this doesn't quite offer you. So I'm going to play a single record. These are dirty, and I apologize, but we're not listening to the music. We're just, observing the functionality. So it won't impact us today. I'll clean the stylus when we're done. So let's start with this thing. This is called an overarm, and it does two things. It stabilizes the records when they're up on the top here of the spindle, because they have a tendency to kind of wobble around. So this helps stabilize them. One might also call this a record stabilizer. And there really should be like foam pads or rubber pads on the bottom. I'll probably put some because that's just plastic, and it does directly touch the top of the record, so that's not ideal. Although when they're stacked, the records on top don't spin, only the one on the platter. It's also a switch. You can hear sort of a switching action there. It tells the turntable when you're done playing the last record in the stack. So it's going to behave differently depending on the condition. So let's see what happens in this configuration. We've got the overarm out and down, and we're going to flip it to start. What happens? Lifts the tone arm up. The record is warped, so bear with me there. And it drops it back down. It's saying, what are you trying to do? We already played those records. It's done. That has to do with the fact that the overarm is still in its position there, and it thinks because the tone arm is home that it's already played this record. So if we lift this bad boy up and put it over here and then go to start, we'll experience something different. It's going to lift the tone arm, it's going to rotate the tone arm, and it's going to play the record. Now that's all fine and dandy. What happens when it gets to the end of the record in this configuration, as it were? Oops. It is going to get to the end. It's going to come back home. Is it going to drop the tone arm? Nope. It's going to play the record again. So in this mode, it's on infinite repeat. This is on repeat all. It's going to play this side over and over again. So if I go and hit auto again, it's going to lift the tone arm up and bring it home, but it's going to put it back and start playing again and again. So let's say I have the overarm in this position, and I simply put this to start. I play my record. It's in full manual operation at that moment. And then it hits the run out groove. What's it going to do? Is it going to bring home the tone arm? Nope. It's going to sit there infinitely, just like a manual turntable. You start to get the gist of what I'm saying here. There's a lot of conditions. So what happens if I go like this? If I just lift the overarm and bring it home, is that going to make a difference? Nope. You're going to have to hit auto, and then we go back into automatic mode, and it brings it home. But will it really bring it home, or will it just start playing? It'll start playing again. So there are a lot of modes and idiosyncrasies that can get annoying if you're not like using this on a day-to-day basis. Like I will screw this up in terms of operating it every single time I pull it out to use it. So just be aware of that. It can do manual mode. It can do repeat all mode. It can do, all these different things. But it is sort of, odd. So let's go ahead. And by the way, when it is off, it helps if I turn it off. There's a lot of mass inertia on that platter. So Sometimes you have to slow it down by touching the platter. It's okay to do that. It doesn't hurt anything. But let's say we want to play a whole stack of records. And we've got one down there on the platter. So we need to lift them all off. And then we're going to lower them onto the spindle. Now, if I don't put the overarm over, see what happens? They just sort of tilt. Or sometimes they can even fall down. So we need to put it right there. Now, this overarm is measuring the amount of records. And on that note, not a gripe, but an observation. I have 5 records on here right now. That seems to be the max for this. If you put more on, it starts dropping 2 at a time. It gets confused. So I've noticed with this one, 5 records is sort of the max. So, the point of this is that you don't have to change the record every 20 minutes, right? And they're, numbered sequentially. So it's designed to play the stack. And you flip the stack over, play the other stack. With 5 records, 18 to 20 minutes aside, you're looking at 90 minutes of music before you have to flip it, more than an hour and a half. So that's an improvement over, 18 to 20 minutes to flip a single record on a regular turntable. All right, so now we got the overarm in position. It knows how many records. This, by the way, the tone arm does adjust its height based on how many records are stacked up down there, which will lead to a gripe down the road. So stay tuned for that. The idea of it being stacked like this is it creates a gap so that the tone arm can operate in this gap and play whatever's down there without affecting, ideally, what's above it. So in this configuration, let's go to start and see what happens. The platter spins up. The tone arm is getting lifted and ready to go to town. And the record drops and it plays the record. And again, when it gets to the end, it will come back home. The tone arm will come back home and it will drop the next record and keep playing. Let's hit auto again, see what happens. Next record is dropped and we keep going, and so on and so forth, which is all fine and dandy as long as this doesn't lift up too high and scratch the bottom of the records. And now this is something that I've observed on mine. When I get to like the 3rd or 4th record, it gets a little bit too high. And sometimes I've observed that it will actually scratch the bottom of the record that's above it. Now, of course, it's not going to do that it's on camera. So perhaps in its adjustment, perhaps it's a quirk that time I played it. So it makes me think, would I stack all my priceless Patsy Cline records on here? Not right off the bat. Not till I feel a little bit more comfortable with this. I feel like it's a little bit rough and tough, but, it is functional. It is cool. It sounds great. It's a great cartridge. It has switched off, and again, because of all the weight on there, all that inertia, it's taken a while to slow down and finally stop. And when you want to play the next side, I'm going to speed it up, the slow down process there. I'm going to flip the records, and you notice they just lifted straight off with no resistance. I'm going to flip them over, put them back on, hit start, and auto, and we start the whole process over again. So in closing, let me just say this. I think it's cool. I think it is cool with some caveats. There's a lot that's going on here, and there's a lot of quirks, so be comfortable with it. Get to know it, and I would say, yes, I would recommend having one, but make sure that you're spending some time with it on some records that you don't prize too heavily before you stack your favorites on here. That being said, it's a great piece of technology. It's electromechanical beast. It's been around for, 50 years, and it's going to be around probably another 50 years. It's working, pretty dang good, except for some things that can be adjusted. Oh yeah, one thing, let me go ahead and shut this off. I want to show you guys something that's kind of cool. So if you ever want to work on this tone arm, like I said, you can make adjustments to it. Look at that. It just rotates up and into a very serviceable manner very, very easily. And there are screws to adjust a lot of stuff, including the counterbalance weight and things of that nature down there. You can also make adjustments in terms of where it drops, where it rejects, and I'm assuming with the lift height as well. Although, like I said, I only had that issue one time where it was lifting so high that it was scratching the record. So not sure why I did it that one time. Luckily, they weren't, super, dollar-wise valuable records. But anyway, there you go, guys. I hope you thought that was interesting. It's fun stuff. Okay, guys, and that is going to do it for today. Again, thank you so very much for everything. I appreciate you more than you know. Happy record hunting. We'll see you next time.